Have you ever felt like your pain was just too much to bear? Like you were carrying a burden so heavy that even the simplest of things seemed overwhelming? If so, you're not alone. Many of us go through life hiding our scars, pretending to be okay, while silently battling the weight of our experiences. But what if I told you that your pain could actually be the key to unlocking a deeper understanding of yourself, and even lead to healing? In this video, we're diving deep into the 12 hidden traits of those who've suffered too much, traits that shape the way they live, love, and cope. From emotional resilience to the ability to appreciate the smallest moments, these traits are often overlooked, but they hold incredible power. You'll learn how pain manifests in ways you might not even realize, how it affects your relationships, and why understanding these traits can help you live a more intentional, fulfilling life. Stick with me until the end, because this isn't just about understanding pain, it's about transforming it into strength, wisdom, and purpose. Whether you're looking for ways to heal, connect with others, or simply make sense of your journey, this video will give you the tools to embrace your scars with compassion and embrace the life that's waiting for you. If you haven't subscribed to our channel yet, please click the subscribe button and ring the notification bell to stay updated on all our latest content. The first trait of those who've suffered too much in life is the armor of hyper-independence. It's not a sign of maturity, as many might believe. It's an old scar, a painful reminder of everything the person has had to endure. From the outside, it may appear as strength-solid, unshakable, and self-sufficient. But in reality, it feels like carrying a weight made of lead, one that never lets up. They refuse to show pain, even though it's consuming them inside. They push it down, lock it away, because showing vulnerability feels like a betrayal of their survival. The very act of asking for comfort feels impossible, not because they don't need it, but because they've forgotten how to ask. They don't even remember what it feels like to trust without fear. This armor spreads like a silent disease, infecting their relationships, friendships, and even their work. Every interaction, every conversation becomes a performance. Everything is about self-control, about holding it together, never letting anyone see the cracks. But the cost of this control is steep. The chest becomes tighter, as if the weight of the world is pressing down with each breath. Touch once, a comforting act, becomes a threat. Rest, a weakness. Even when surrounded by people, they feel utterly alone, because hyperindependence is not freedom, it's a prison, one with an internal lock. These individuals do not want to be a burden, but in their efforts to protect themselves from further pain, they've built walls so high that even they can't get over them. They just want to make sure they will never be left hanging again. But deep inside, it's just another way to remain silently wounded, a perpetual cycle of self-sufficiency that isolates them from the very help they need. The second trait, often seen in those who've suffered too much, is excessive empathy. At first glance, it may seem like a beautiful trait, a virtue that makes them compassionate and caring. But when empathy becomes a survival mechanism, it stops being just a quality and becomes a strategy for coping. Some people, even as children, learn to scan a room as though they were looking for shelter. They pick up on the smallest changes, the tone of someone's voice, the way a person moves, the silence that speaks louder than words. Their sensitivity sharpens to a point where they start feeling the emotions of others before they even know how to recognize their own. This kind of over-empathy doesn't come from a place of lightness or peace. It's born out of necessity. It's rooted in fear, the fear of being the target of an unstable parent, the fear of anticipating the next emotional outburst, the constant effort to keep the peace at home, even when it means sacrificing their childhood. Jung called this projection an unconscious move of placing emotions onto others that we haven't dared to confront in ourselves. And that's exactly what happens with those who feel too much for others. They are, without realizing it, trying to care for the pain in others that they haven't yet faced in themselves. These people become the constant support, the go-to advisor, the one who's always there for everyone else. But behind all this giving Behind the ever-present smile and comforting words lies an exhaustion so deep that they often forget what it's like to care for themselves. Too much empathy can seem noble, and in many ways it is. But it can also be a form of escape, a way to avoid diving into one's pain. It's a way of existing for others, because existing for oneself has become too painful. Worse, this kind of empathy can lead to unbalanced relationships, where one person gives and the other only takes. Listening to others becomes an excuse to never listen to your own heart, to never hear your own needs. Little by little, this sensitivity turns into overload. Those who carry this trait often feel invisible when they're not being useful. And that's the clearest sign that empathy has stopped being love and turned into a defense mechanism. Deep down, all this emotional sensitivity has a reason. Someone, at some point, had to anticipate emotions just to survive. But now, in a world that is no longer threatening, they don't have to do that anymore. The greatest act of real empathy, perhaps, is to turn that attentiveness inward, to stop absorbing everything around you and start acknowledging your own needs, your pain. Some people love halfway, not because they don't feel, but because they feel way too much. They hold back, they observe, they analyze every detail before they dare to open their heart. And even when they start to trust, they always keep a part of themselves hidden away, a part that no one touches. It's a place where doubt lives. It's like something inside whispers, "Be careful, this could hurt again." And it really could. For someone who was broken right where they most needed safety, opening up stopped being a simple act. The memory of abandonment screams louder than the presence of affection. Love might show up, but fear tags along, reminding them of what they've lost. This is the third trait of those who've suffered too much, the fear of true relationships. For them, intimacy is like an alarm that goes off in their soul, one they can't ignore. It's not about being dramatic or overly sensitive. It's the unconscious mind recognizing patterns that left deep, painful marks in the past. Even if the person in the present can't quite explain why they're reacting that way, it's like their very being is on guard, constantly bracing for the pain that may come from trusting again. In relationships, this trait shows up as overreactions, jealousy that feels irrational, or sudden withdrawal from intimacy. But what's happening beneath the surface is that there's an inner child who remembers exactly how much it hurt to trust and then be abandoned. On the outside, the person may appear confident, sometimes even self-sufficient. They might say things like, "I don't need anyone," or "I'm better off alone." But deep inside, there's a longing, a desperate need to feel loved, to be seen, to be held. Every time someone gets too close, it triggers a deep fear, disguised as irritability, control, or silence. True relationships require a person to show up fully, to be vulnerable. But for someone who's been through the trauma of abandonment, being fully present in love feels like exposing a wound that may never heal. And so, love, what should be a place of refuge, turns into a battlefield, a space where walls are built to protect and yet, ironically, isolate. If you love someone like this, you'll need a lot of patience. You'll need to understand that for them, every act of love feels like a gamble. And if you see yourself in this, you'll need even more courage, not to dive headfirst into every relationship, but to believe, just maybe, the present doesn't have to be a repeat of the past. Not all love is painful. Not every expression of care is disguised abandonment. Sometimes, it's just someone trying desperately to stay, to allow themselves to trust once again. How many times have you heard people say, "You're so strong"? And every time you smile, nod, and say, "Thank you." But no one knows that. That very night, you cried yourself to sleep, alone, yet again. Some people become symbols of strength because they never had another choice. When the world falls apart too soon, you either hold up the roof with your own hands or you collapse beneath it. So, The body learns to rise each day, even when every part of you just wants to lie down and disappear. It becomes a habit, getting up and going through the motions, no matter how heavy the weight. The fourth trait of those who've suffered too much is the persona of the strong person who breaks down alone. From the outside, they seem balanced, their voice firm, their gaze steady. But behind this facade, there's an exhaustion that no one sees, because showing fatigue feels like an unacceptable weakness. And showing pain, it's simply not an option. Carl Jung called this persona the social mask, something we all wear, but when the pain becomes too much to carry, that mask stops being a choice. It becomes a permanent shield, one that protects, but also isolates. The person becomes what the world needs them to be. They forget what it feels like to be what they truly are, to feel, to ask for help, to need comfort. And the risk? All of that strength, that unwavering performance, becomes a silent prison. No one asks if they need help, because everyone believes they've got it all under control. But no one, no matter how strong they seem, can handle everything all the time. And no one should. What appears to be stability is often just containment. What looks like self-control is a fear of falling apart in front of anyone, because that would be too much. That would be too vulnerable. So they hold it all together, trying to keep the illusion intact, while slowly cracking on the inside. When the breakdown comes, it happens in solitude, alone in the shower, alone on the pillow, alone on the way home. No one sees the cracks, no one suspects, because the performance has been so flawless. It doesn't even seem possible that anything could be wrong, but it is. It's been too heavy for too long. Real strength isn't about never falling. It's about having the courage to say, honestly, today is hard. And in that moment, trusting that someone will listen, not with judgment, not with advice or solutions, but simply to listen. Just listen. And maybe, just maybe, on that day, the armor will start to loosen. The person will start to breathe again. The walls, slowly but surely, may come down. The fifth trait of those who've suffered too much is sensory sensitivity. For these individuals, loud sounds can feel overwhelmingly harsh, bright lights sting their eyes, and crowded places drain them completely. The mind tries its best to stay in control, to manage the environment and the sensations, but the body reacts first. The heart races, breathing becomes short and shallow. An urge to flee, to escape, arises without any clear reason, yet it is undeniable. It's not about being dramatic or seeking attention. It's simply the result of a nervous system that has learned to live on high alert. And behind this hypersensitivity, there's a story, a painful history, a childhood marked by danger that arrived without warning, a trauma that transformed the world into a constant threat. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons helpful, please comment number 1 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. This heightened sensitivity often stems from a body that couldn't relax for far too long. Emotional pain, when it's deep and relentless, doesn't just stay in the heart, it infiltrates the body. The body doesn't forget. As Carl Jung said, what doesn't come to consciousness returns as fate. In the case of old pain, it returns as physical sensations. The body speaks the words that the soul hasn't yet found the courage to speak. This sensitivity makes people notice things that others miss. A background sound that feels intrusive, a smell that no one else picks up on, a glance that lasts just half a second too long and feels like judgment. It's like living with all the senses on full blast, even when there's no actual danger. And it's exhausting, often confusing, because the people around them don't understand why certain places feel off, why that party felt overwhelming, or why a simple conversation left them feeling drained. But for the one who feels it, everything is stimulus. Everything hits at full volume. While this heightened sensitivity can feel like a curse, it can also be a gift when understood. Many people with this trait are intuitive, perceptive, and deeply aware. They can pick up on things that others cannot, and that awareness can be incredibly valuable. But when this sensitivity is rooted in trauma, it becomes a burden. The body turns into a silent battlefield, reacting to threats the conscious mind has already forgotten, but that the soul still holds tight to. Healing begins when we finally acknowledge how pain impacts the body, when we understand that discomfort isn't a sign of weakness, but a memory. And sometimes, an exaggerated reaction to stimuli isn't random sometimes. It's the body's way of crying out, saying, "It was too much for me once, and I'm just trying to protect you." This is not a weakness, this is survival. The sixth trait of those who've suffered too much is the obsessive need for control. It's not because these people are bossy, rigid, or controlling in the typical sense. No, it's because at some point in their lives, chaos overwhelmed them, and they learned the hard way that if they didn't control everything, everything could fall apart. Control becomes their way to breathe, their way to cope with an unpredictable world that's caused them too much pain. It's not about power or dominance, it's about fear. Fear of being caught off guard again. Fear of reliving something that already took so much from them. On the outside, this need for control may look like efficiency, organization, and responsibility. But inside, it's constant tension. There's no peace. Because even when everything seems fine, their mind is racing with what-ifs. What if something goes wrong? What if I forgot something important? What if? Carl Jung once said, "The ego tries to control exactly what the unconscious doesn't want to face." And, in this case, control becomes a barricade against life's unpredictability, against the helplessness that once consumed them and never fully left. People caught in this mode of control struggle to relax. They hate delegating tasks. They resist accepting the unexpected because, to them, surprises aren't just inconvenient, they're emotional threats. They disrupt more than routines. They shake the psyche. Often, these individuals don't even realize how trapped they are in this cycle. They just feel constantly tired, always overloaded, always fixing everything, fixing things, even when no one asked them to. This need for control comes at a cost. Relationships become tense. Small decisions feel monumental. The present moment is never enough because their mind is always 2 steps ahead, trying to predict every outcome, trying to prevent disaster. At its core, this obsession with control is not a sign of strength. No, it's a mark of a soul that once felt completely powerless against pain and is now trying to make up for it. But life, with all its wild, unpredictable nature, cannot be controlled. It can only be lived, and living requires trust that maybe, just maybe, not everything needs to be controlled for things to work out. Healing doesn't come from simply dropping control all at once. It comes from realizing, little by little, that it's possible to exist without constantly fearing everything will collapse. Letting go of control is like turning off the lights in a room where you used to sleep with every light on, terrified of the dark. At first, it's unsettling, but over time, it might become rest, real rest. Rest that doesn't require noise, people, or constant activity. Sometimes, true relief comes when everything quiets down, when the outside world stops demanding, pressing, and touching. And for the first time in a long while, you can simply be. The seventh trait of those who have endured the deepest of wounds is their tendency to seek refuge in silence. This silence isn't about isolation born of disdain or anger. It's a quiet plea for space, a yearning for a moment of stillness where they can breathe without the weight of expectations or the noise of the world pushing in. It's about needing a pause to gather themselves, to reconnect with their own breath without feeling constantly watched or judged. For them, silence becomes a sanctuary, a cocoon, where the soul can begin the fragile process of healing, sorting through the pieces of itself that have been torn apart by life's storms. But for those who have never known the pain of truly suffering, this need for solitude can be difficult to comprehend. People who thrive on movement, chatter, and constant activity may look at someone who prefers a quiet corner, a brief conversation, or simply a lighter presence, and wonder why. Why would anyone choose silence over connection? But here's the truth. For those who have faced inner battles, silence isn't emptiness. It's restoration. It's not an avoidance, but a necessary act of repair. Carl Jung understood this deeply. He spoke of retreat, not as withdrawal in weakness, but as a psychic process of death and rebirth. When life becomes overwhelming, the soul pulls back, like someone instinctively shielding a wound from touch, not because they've hardened, but because they've learned that sometimes, to survive, we must retreat. Silence in this context isn't just the absence of noise. It's the absence of judgment, the absence of expectations, the absence of masks. It's a space where nothing needs to be explained, where pain can simply exist without an audience, without pressure to fix it quickly. And yet, there's a quiet danger in this retreat. Over time, what begins as a healing silence can shift. It can become a wall, slowly creeping higher with each passing day. What was once a needed pause for healing can become a pattern, and the risk is that it turns into solitude. The more it becomes a fortress, the further it distances you from the very connection you once craved. Silence can turn into something more dangerous: forgetfulness. A forgetting of the world outside, of the warmth of human connection, of the voices that could soothe or heal. That's why this trait, this need for silence, requires compassion and careful attention. Not everyone who goes silent is okay. Sometimes they're simply too exhausted, too weary of trying to fit into a world that never seems to stop talking, never seems to stop demanding. The path to healing isn't about pushing the silence away or forcing a return to what was. It's about giving permission to sit in that silence, free of guilt, free of the need to explain oneself. But it's also about knowing when the silence has done its work and when it's time to gently open the door, just a crack, to let someone in, someone who will listen without judgment, someone who will stay even when the silence is all that remains. Because silence, while it can be a home, a place of peace and refuge, needs a door, a way to let light in. And here's the kicker. Have you ever noticed how saying, "I trust you," can seem so simple on the surface, but for someone who has been hurt before, those words can feel like they're suffocating them. It's as if the very act of saying those words locks them up inside, gets stuck somewhere deep in their chest, preventing them from leaving. The emotion itself is trapped in the body, not because the feeling isn't real, but because the risk feels too great. The scars from past wounds make the idea of opening up again seem so overwhelmingly dangerous, even when the person in front of them is kind and trustworthy. The weight of that risk feels too much to bear. The eighth trait of those who have suffered too much is the development of a heart that is overly guarded, locked tight with every ounce of protection it can muster. And this isn't done out of malice, arrogance, or a lack of care. It's not that they don't want to love or be loved, but rather because the last time their heart was open, it was shattered. It was broken in ways they didn't think they could recover from. And that kind of hurt leaves deep, permanent scars. The ego, ever the protector, learns quickly to shield itself. It builds invisible barriers, creating filters that screen every word, every gesture, every tone of voice, every pause in a conversation before it allows anything to slip through. Love may arrive, but it must first pass through an exhausting, ruthless process of judgment before it can be accepted. And for the person who feels this, it is draining. The love they could offer gets caught in a web of doubt and fear because nothing flows easily. There's always hidden tension, that question lurking in the back of their mind. Can I really trust this? Can I really allow myself to feel again? The soul, forever bruised, sleeps with one eye open, always watching, always waiting for the next blow. Carl Jung spoke about the difference between living from fear and living from trust. For those who have been hurt so deeply, fear becomes the lens through which they view everything. They don't trust easily. Even when everything seems fine, there's a nagging voice inside saying, "Be ready. This could change. This could hurt again." It's as if the unconscious mind refuses to acknowledge that time has passed, that the danger is no longer present. Even when the person in front of them is kind, present, and gentle, the wounds of the past still react, triggering a distrust that they can't easily turn off. They're not doing it to hurt anyone, they're simply protecting themselves, trying to prevent history from repeating itself. But in doing so, they unknowingly block the very thing they crave, a deep, authentic connection. There can be no real love, no true connection, without some form of surrender, without taking a risk, without opening the door and allowing someone in. The irony here is heartbreaking. The people who guard their hearts the most are often the ones who long to love and be loved the deepest. They desperately want connection, but they don't want to feel that crushing pain again. They just want to protect themselves. But the truth is, overprotecting only hurts more. The key to healing, to truly opening up again, lies in testing the waters, trusting just a little bit at a time, taking small steps forward and seeing what happens. It's about being vulnerable, but not all at once. It's about letting go of the past, just enough to see that not all love is meant to hurt. Sometimes, just sometimes, love comes to stay, not to wound, but to heal. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons helpful, please comment number 2 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. And then there's the 9th trait, perhaps the most profound and visceral of them all, a sense of justice, sharpened by pain. This isn't the kind of justice that's learned in books or preached in grand speeches. No, this sense of justice comes from first-hand experience with betrayal, with being silenced, with standing in the face of injustice and realizing no one was there to protect you. The soul that has been crushed by injustice becomes a radar for it, picking up on even the faintest traces of disrespect or dishonesty. It doesn't tolerate injustice anymore. The slightest spark of it sets off an old alarm, a reflex of defense, but also a deep, visceral memory. Jung understood this well. He knew that emotional complexes often activate when the present touches the same wound that was created in the past. This heightened sense of justice is a direct result of the wounds that haven't fully healed, the scars that still burn when touched. The people who carry this trait often act out of the pain of their past, and they'll fight for what is right with an intensity that comes from their very core. It's the moral warrior archetype, someone who stands for what is true, for respect, for integrity, not for perfection, but for dignity. It's a fight to ensure that what happened to them doesn't happen again, not just to themselves, but to anyone. But this fight, when driven solely by pain, can become rigid, intolerant, and unforgiving. The challenge then is not to lose sight of what this sense of justice truly stands for. It's about keeping that fierce need for fairness, but not allowing it to become armor that keeps the world at bay. Yes, use the sword of justice to defend what's right, but also know when it's time to lower it, to listen, and to embrace. Those who have been hurt by injustice know better than anyone how much it wounds, but they also know that in that very wound lies the rare opportunity to do things differently, because those who carry the sword of justice have a unique ability. Pain sharpens their perception, not just to spot injustice, but to see the pain that others try to hide. There's a quiet strength in those who've suffered, a strength that allows them to sense when someone is hurting, even when that pain is buried beneath a smile. They understand what isn't being said, what is being left unsaid, and they hold space for others without needing to ask questions. They see the silent struggles that others go through and know exactly how to offer comfort without pushing for answers. And perhaps that is the greatest gift they can give, to be the kind of presence that can protect without punishing, that can fight for justice without getting lost in the war. The 10th trait of those who have suffered too much is a profound ability to see what is invisible in others. It's as if their pain has fine-tuned their senses, sharpening their awareness in ways that others might miss. The soul becomes more alert, more attuned to the subtle undercurrents of sadness that others try to hide, even when they mask it behind smiles or busy distractions. This ability isn't magic, though it may seem like it. It's something deeper. It's memory of having lived in the skin of sadness and loss, so intimately that the faintest signs of it now stand out, like a familiar scent or a soft whisper in a crowded room. This kind of perception isn't something you can learn in a textbook. It's born from experience, or better yet, it's awakened after a fall, when you've cried silently into the night, when you felt the crushing weight of loneliness in a room full of people. You learn how to recognize that same ache in others. It's almost instinctive, an emotional radar that detects what others cannot see, what they might not even be aware of themselves. Carl Jung once said that as we integrate our own pain, we become more attuned to the collective pain of others. That's what this trait is, a heightened sensitivity, an emotional radar that doesn't seek to be seen, but only shows up when needed most. And when it does, it can change everything. It often makes the difference between someone feeling truly seen and being left in their invisible suffering. This sensitivity, while it may appear gentle, carries incredible weight. Seeing what no one else sees is not only a gift, but a responsibility. When you understand someone's pain without them speaking it, when you can feel their heartache without them showing it, it's both a privilege and a burden. Those who feel deeply for others often forget to care for themselves. They absorb the pain of others like a sponge. They give so much of themselves that they sometimes lose track of who they are in the process. The key, then, is balance. To see others without losing yourself. To be present with someone's pain without dissolving into it. To feel with someone without carrying all of it. This ability to perceive the invisible is truly a gift, but it is also a reminder. Pain, when processed with awareness, becomes a tool. It becomes a presence, a touch that supports rather than invades. And those who possess this sensitivity know, even when the world is rushing by, that the truth lies in the smallest details. It's in the way someone sits, the pause between their words, in the "I'm fine" that doesn't quite convince. These are the things that someone with this trait can pick up on: small shifts in the body, subtle hesitations in speech, the things that others overlook, but that speak volumes to the person who has felt real pain. But seeing others so clearly comes at a cost. When you can read the eyes, the gestures, the tone of voice of someone else so well, there's always a quiet voice inside you asking, what if, in the end, I'm just a burden? What if my presence, my empathy, is too much for them? Have you ever caught yourself apologizing for something small, for nothing at all? Have you ever felt like, just by being there, you're taking up too much space? This feeling, this quiet shame of existing fully in the world, is the shadow side of such sensitivity. It's the cost of being so attuned to others. It sometimes makes you question your own worth. But here's the truth. Feeling like a burden, like you don't deserve to take up space, is an illusion. You have the right to exist, to feel, to be. The ability to perceive others' pain, to understand their struggles, does not make you a burden. It makes you a source of light, a presence that brings comfort, even in silence. So, next time you find yourself apologizing for your own existence, for simply being there, remember, you are not too much. You are enough, and your capacity to feel deeply, to see others in their most vulnerable moments, is a gift that the world needs more of. The 11th trait of those who have suffered too much is a deep, constant fear of being a burden. It's a quiet, insidious feeling that never quite goes away. A silent shame that lingers in the background, whispering that just by existing, just by needing, they are taking up too much space. For those who carry this fear, It's often a secret they never speak aloud. It's not something they can share, even with the people they love. It manifests in the subtle ways they try to shrink themselves to fit into the world around them. It's in the way they say, "I'm okay," even when they're not, just to spare others the burden of worrying. It's in the times they swallow their tears, telling themselves they can't show weakness because they're afraid it will be seen as a flaw. It's in every moment they hide their struggles, fearing that asking for help will be too much for others to bear. This trait often begins in childhood, when emotional pain is ignored, dismissed, or worse, turned into a problem for others. Kids who were told stop crying, don't be dramatic, or worse, treated as though their feelings didn't matter, grow up with the belief that their emotions are a burden. They internalize the message that their very existence is an inconvenience. As they grow into adulthood, these people often become the kindest, most helpful, and most responsible individuals you could ever meet. But they are also constantly afraid of being too much. They feel guilty for needing help, for taking up space, for being vulnerable. They live their lives trying to make up for the simple fact that they exist, as if they owe the world an apology for their mere presence. Carl Jung called this unconscious guilt a wound so deep that the ego builds itself around it. It's the message that says, you only have value if you don't get in the way. This wound becomes the foundation upon which they build their identity, constantly justifying their own existence, softening their pain by minimizing their needs. Even the love they receive can become uncomfortable because they feel as though they are taking the place of someone more deserving. Living like this feels like walking through life afraid to leave footprints, existing as though they need permission just to breathe. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons helpful, please comment number 3 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. But here's the truth, that so many don't understand. No one should feel guilty for needing. Needing is human. Being tired is human. Being vulnerable is human. And recognizing this fear, facing it head-on, is already part of the healing process. Because once you understand that taking up space isn't an offense, it's a right, something inside you shifts. The weight you carry becomes a little lighter. The burden of guilt slowly starts to fade away. Your soul stands a bit taller, as if it's finally allowed to take up the space it was always meant to occupy. Life no longer becomes a constant effort to avoid bothering anyone, to fit into the narrow confines of what you believe is acceptable. You don't have to earn affection. You don't have to explain yourself at every turn. Simply being here, existing as you are, is enough. And even with all that fear of being a burden, your soul still finds refuge in the unnoticed details. It's in the warmth of a hot cup of coffee in your hands, the simple joy of holding something warm when the world feels cold. It's in that good morning no one else thought to offer, but that small act of kindness that makes you feel seen. It's in the "did you get home safe?" message, the small gesture that lets you know someone cares. It's in the sound of rain falling softly outside while the world continues to spin on its axis. For those who have lost so much, these small, everyday moments take on an immense weight. They learn to treasure the simplest things, the things that so many overlook. And that's where healing begins to smile, in the small moments that remind us of our worth, of our right to exist fully and unapologetically. A warm cup in your hands, the soft light of late afternoon filtering through the window, a quiet message, a thoughtful gesture, a simple "I'm here." These are the things that heal us, that remind us that we are enough, that our needs are not burdens, but part of what makes us human. The 12th trait of those who have suffered too much is the ability to appreciate the little things. This is not about romanticizing pain or pretending that suffering is something to be cherished. It's about what pain leaves behind, what it teaches us, what it makes us aware of. When you've lived through moments where everything seems to be falling apart, when chaos consumes your life and makes you feel like you're drowning, the smallest things start to take on a new meaning. The ordinary, the the seemingly insignificant becomes something profound. The small things no longer feel small. They become signs of life, symbols of peace, of presence in a world that once seemed so uncertain. Those who have been shattered, who have been broken to their core, learn to recognize beauty in the places where others don't even think to look. They see the delicate petals of a flower that most people would walk past without a second thought. They notice the fleeting beauty of a sunset that others might dismiss as just another moment in time. They see the light in the dark, the silver lining, even when it feels like there is no hope. It's in these little things that they find solace, in the simple moments that many overlook. The soul, having been through the storms of life, develops a quiet gratitude, not for the pain itself, but for what came after, for the moments of peace, for the unexpected affection, for the stability that once seemed unattainable. Carl Jung spoke of the archetype of the wise one, the individual who has faced the shadow, the darkest parts of themselves, and returned with a new perspective on life. This person is more humble, more attentive, more present. They have learned to see the world with new eyes, eyes that appreciate the small things, the things that are often taken for granted. That's what happens when someone has endured great suffering. They don't need much to feel fulfilled, and when they do feel, they feel deeply. This sensitivity often shows up in the little things. It's the person who smiles when they see the sky change color, as if that simple shift in the atmosphere speaks to their soul. It's the person who truly thanks you for making a cup of coffee at just the right moment, because in that moment, it feels like everything. It's the person who cries when they hear a song that touches a wound they didn't know was still there, a song that brings up a memory they thought was buried. And sometimes, this sensitivity is mistaken for fragility. People may look at them and think they're too sensitive, too fragile, but this couldn't be further from the truth. It's the opposite. It's not fragility, it's depth. It's emotional maturity. It's the strength that comes from having survived chaos and still being able to hold on to tenderness, to the quiet things that make life beautiful. The ability to appreciate the little things is a trait of someone who knows what it feels like to lose everything, someone who has known the depths of despair and, through it all, learned to recognize the value in the things that remain. They've learned that nothing is guaranteed, and because of that, they treasure the moments before they're gone. It's a fuller presence in the world, a kind of silence that knows how to listen to what is unsaid. It's a look that gives thanks, even before asking. It's the gentle awareness of life, unfolding in small, meaningful ways. The way the sunlight catches a leaf, the sound of rain on the roof, the comfort of a warm hug. These are the things that those who have suffered too much learn to treasure, because in those small moments, they find a piece of peace, a moment of connection with the world that reminds them, despite everything they've been through, that beauty and tenderness still exist, and that, in itself, is worth everything. And the final trait of those who've suffered too much is the profound need for purpose after the pain. Simply surviving isn't enough. The soul yearns for meaning. It wants to understand why it had to endure, why the suffering was necessary. Pain, in this sense, isn't something to simply get through. It's a force that demands to be transformed, to be shaped into something meaningful, to become a source of direction in a world that can feel chaotic and uncertain. The soul doesn't just want to survive, it needs to make sense of what once felt like pure devastation. It's common, after enduring a significant hardship, for someone to begin searching for something greater than themselves. They want a reason to keep moving forward, a way to ensure that all they've been through wasn't in vain. And here's the surprising truth. The reason is rarely grand, rarely some monumental calling. It's usually simpler, but profoundly true. It might be about helping someone else who is going through the same thing, offering them a hand to hold when they feel like they can't take another step. It might involve creating something new, whether that's through writing, art, teaching, caring, or healing. It could be as simple as showing up for someone, being there in the way that no one was for them. but there has to be a why. Pain longs to become purpose, to become a path. Carl Jung referred to this shift as the beginning of individuation, the process where someone stops being a prisoner of their own story and begins to turn it into awareness, into purpose, and into something they can offer the world. This trait is visible in how the person begins to show up in the world, not with an obsession for appearance, but with a deeper connection to truth. They understand that life is fleeting, and that simply existing comes at a cost. They feel the weight of it, and so they choose to make it count. They begin to give meaning to even the most unbearable moments, taking the pain that once dominated their lives and using it to fuel their intentions. And no, that doesn't mean the pain has vanished. It's still there, as memory, as scar, but it no longer has the power to control them. Now it points. Now it shows the way forward. Those who embrace this trait start to look back at their journey and realize something incredible. Even when they were broken, they kept going. Even when they were wounded, they still cared. Even when they didn't know exactly how, they transformed their suffering into presence and their presence into purpose. They did it. They didn't just survive, they lived. And it wasn't about appearing strong or becoming a role model for others. It was about, little by little, shifting from mere survival into a life lived with intention. This need for purpose is not an escape from pain. It is growth. It's the birth of something new deep within the soul, a quiet voice that says, I went through that. But that's not all I am. And from this place of understanding, life begins to bloom again in a way it never has before. They are not defined by their pain, but neither do they hide it. It's part of them, but it doesn't consume them. Instead, it propels them forward into something richer, something deeper. There is a strange strength in the way we survive. It's not the kind of strength that's celebrated with applause or witnessed by others. It's raw and quiet, forged deep in the background of the soul, in the moments when no one is watching, when no one knows just how hard you're holding on. Every trait we've talked about, all of these pieces that have been shaped by hardship, are reflections of that quiet strength. They show us how you stayed on your feet, how you kept going even when every part of you wanted to stop. Some of these traits became shields, protecting your heart from further harm. Others became compasses, guiding you through the darkness. Some turned into weight, burdens you had to carry, and others transformed into gifts, treasures that made you who you are today. But all of them, without exception, were born from an attempt to protect something precious within you, something that pain could never take away. As we've explored today, each of these traits that arise from suffering holds profound wisdom that can guide us toward healing, growth, and a deeper understanding of ourselves and others. From learning to appreciate the smallest moments to finding purpose in the pain, these traits reflect the strength and resilience that can be born from even the deepest struggles. So, what have you learned from today's video? Is there one trait that stood out to you, one lesson that you feel ready to bring into your own life? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Please comment below with one thing you've learned and how you plan to apply it moving forward. And if you found this video helpful, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, share it with someone who might need to hear this message, and hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any future content. Thank you for being here, and remember, you're not just surviving, you're living with intention. See you in the next video.